everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching. Thanks for joining us. My name's Dan DiFrancesco. I'm the Deputy Executive Editor here at Business Insider. I also author our daily newsletter, Business Insider Today. As I'm sure you've seen, there were some major cuts at Amazon this week. Some 14,000 corporate employees were cut, and there's also some fears that there could be more to come. But even beyond Amazon, there's also some wider concerns that this could be the first wave of these AI-driven layoffs that seems to have been kind of worrying so much of white-collar workforce. But before we get into that, let's first focus on Amazon. And specifically, you all are in for a real treat because we pulled him away from his sources just long enough to chat with us. The great Chief Tech Correspondent Eugene Kim is joining us today. He's going to chat through what's been going on at Amazon. So first of all, Eugene, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's just start right off the top. 14,000 gone, talk of maybe even more. What prompted this, right? What's behind these cuts? What kind of led up to Amazon to making this decision on Tuesday?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, Amazon overhired during the pandemic. So, they saw huge growth during COVID. They went on this massive hiring spree, invested in a lot of different areas. That growth obviously didn't continue. And by late 2022, early 23, it became clear that Amazon had grown too much too fast. And so they realized that they become this sort of bloated, overstaffed company. And now there's a strong desire to cut organizational fat, reduce management layers, trim the workforce, and just become a much leaner, more nimble company. They like to call themselves the world's largest startup. And this week's job cuts, it's just part of that same effort of recalibrating their headcount. So that's one component. The other side of the story is AI. It's possible that Amazon is seeing significant productivity gains from AI. If they are replacing 14,000 people with AI and automation, that's potentially a good sign for Amazon that their investments are already starting to pay off. And their CEO, Andy Jassy, he kind of alluded to this in June. He said that the efficiency gains from AI will probably lead to a smaller workforce, smaller corporate workforce. And he warned employees to, learn how to use AI or you're going to risk falling behind. Amazon also doubled down on this same idea on Tuesday that they're kind of the job cuts is intended to maybe future-proof the company ahead of the onslaught of AI that they anticipate.
Yeah, it's so interesting too. You say, if these tools can offer those efficiencies possible, right? Because I know you've reported on this top to front, but there have been some issues with some of the adoption of some of Amazon tools, and it's all part of this reset. But I think so as we look forward, right, some of the reporting that I should say that, one of the divisions that was hit the hardest was the retail division. And it was also a lot of early and mid-career managers. Was that surprising to you? I mean, from an outsider, not an expert, the retail division is how I am most aware of Amazon from all the stuff that I get delivered to my house every day. So it's, but I know that the margins are a little bit tighter in that business, but you're the expert here. I mean, what was your takeaway from that?
Right. So the retail business is where Amazon grew the fastest during COVID, and it's their most mature business. That's likely where the most bloat accumulated. So I don't think it's too surprising. Retail is also not growing as fast as some of the other parts of Amazon, like AWS, the cloud division, or advertising. They're faster growing and much more profitable than retail. So Amazon may want to reallocate some of its resources. And on top of that, Amazon's retail business has been really aggressively investing in faster shipping and groceries this year. Both of those areas famously low margin. So Amazon, again, they may have felt the need to cut more costs to reinvest in those areas. And with, going back to Andy Jassy, he's been very public about wanting to have fewer managers. This year, they flattened the organization. They reduced the ratio of managers to individual contributors by 15%. He's been on this kind of a mission to prioritize, strengthening work culture and injecting more discipline, eliminating bureaucracy. So this is all part of that kind of broader movement.
Sure, sure. And I know we spoke earlier this week. You graciously offered some of your expertise in the BI Today newsletter, and when you talked about previewing the earnings, you mentioned that cloud was a big piece of the Amazon puzzle. Now, the cloud division was not really impacted too much this time around, but I know some of the reporting that you've done suggests that that could be the next division that does get hit, and there's a lot of concerns there. Maybe talk a little bit about what you're hearing from your sources and what the potential expectations are later this year or early next year.
Yeah, we've been hearing from multiple sources that managers are bracing for more layoffs, potentially later this year, early next year. Amazon did the same thing in 2022 when they laid off 27,000 people. They did it over several months in, multiple phases. Other reports suggest that the job cuts could reach up to 30,000. So there's 16,000 more to go. And given that a lot of the cuts were focused on retail this time, I'm hearing from people that next round of layoffs could really focus on AWS, which has seen slower growth lately. There's a lot of anxiety internally.
Yeah, I mean, cutting 14,000 people, in one day, that'll certainly do it. Before I let you go, one last thing. Obviously, today, this afternoon, after the bell, Amazon will report earnings. What should we expect? I imagine this will be somewhat of a topic, or maybe it's get this out, get this done with on Tuesday, and then focus on the future. But what should we expect come post bell from Amazon?
I think the spotlight is on AWS and AI. Wall Street is not too impressed by AWS or their progress in AI. There's a growing narrative around AWS falling behind its competitors like Microsoft and Google. In fact, during their last earnings call in July, Morgan Stanley analyst just asked Andy Jassy about this perception, and Jassy's answer wasn't too strong, and Amazon stock dropped during the earnings call. So there's still a lot of question marks. And again, yesterday, both Microsoft and Google reported very strong results in cloud. So, investors are waiting for some, the same level of excitement coming out of AWS.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Eugene, we've taken up enough of your time. I know for you got to get back to those sources and keep up that great reporting. So we appreciate so much your expertise, and thanks so much for taking the time.
All right. Thank you.
And so now I want to turn to another one of my colleagues, Aki Ito, who is the best in the business when it comes to workplace trends. She's joining me now from San Francisco. Aki, thanks so much for taking the time.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. So let's dig in. You had a story go up shortly after the layoffs talking about the headline was the error of mega AI layoffs this year. And I got to say, we had a fun little back and forth in the newsletter a couple weeks ago. I was a little bit more cynical about something. I feel like your stories there's always a silver lining. It's always very optimistic, or can be optimistic. This one, and I'm gonna, not to quote it back to you, Amazon's full throttle layoffs are a warning sign for white collar workers everywhere. That doesn't feel optimistic. That feels a little scary. So talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing, what you thought about Amazon's layoffs as far as the broader impact to the white collar workforce.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this one's a bleak one. I think so far this year, what we've been seeing is that AI is prompting companies to hire fewer people. Like there were some small like AI-based layoffs, but they were pretty targeted. They were surgical. Um, and for the most part, like the vision that companies had was to trim headcount pretty slowly by natural attrition. What we're seeing now with Amazon, though, is these big AI based layoffs all in one fell swoop. And that kind of moves us into this new era where it's no longer, bit by bit. It's all in one go. Um, and I think like what worries me is now there's like extraordinary pressure on not just, well, Amazon already did it, but on all these other big tech companies that are also in the AI race to do the same. Back in late 2022, we saw something very similar happen. Meta was like the first to do these big layoffs. And then basically every other major company in Silicon Valley did the same. As a result, more than 250,000 people in tech lost their jobs just in 2023 alone. So I worry that Amazon is just the first company to do this, and we're going to see a lot more in the year ahead.
Yeah, I think the point you bring up about the trickle versus the all-in-one go, that's the potentially the scariest part of this whole thing, right? It's been 3 years since ChatGPT came out. I think all of us, to lesser degrees or more degrees, and we can get into that later, potentially were nervous about AI coming for jobs. But to, in one fell swoop on a random Tuesday, to see kind of 14,000 people wiped out from a company, largely because of potentially the efficiencies they see coming from AI, it makes everyone tense up a lot more, I think, right?
Yeah, I think the point I make in my story is that the speed at which this change happens matters enormously. It's one thing for jobs to disappear slowly. That gives us time to adjust. It gives us time to prepare. It gives workers time to reassess their careers and learn new skills. It gives voters time to push for new guardrails. But when change happens fast, there's no time for us to actually make those preparations, to make those adjustments.
Hmm.
And it's just, that's painful. That's extraordinarily painful when it happens, when it just hits you like a bullet train.
Right.
It's interesting because when I first started reporting on ChatGPT's impact on the labor market back in like early 2023, I thought we would start to see like really meaningful changes in the corporate workforce, maybe like 10 years from that time.
Hmm.
Then earlier this year, when I started hearing of more and more companies hiring less because of AI, like I was still surprised that that happened so quickly. And I kind of changed my timeline to like, okay, maybe it's like going to be about 5 years. Now that Amazon's already done this huge round of layoffs because of I worry that, the disruption, the displacement is already here.
Yeah, and it's so true too about like that timeline gives people to adjust and reskill, because that's often the rhetoric that we hear from the big supporters of AI is, well, you need to kind of adjust. But it's tough to adjust if, overnight essentially your job is taken away because of that. But I want to kind of stick on that point as far as the cause, because there has been a counter narrative that has kind of come out that AI is an easy scapegoat, that it's easy to kind of tout this as AI is taking jobs, or AI is creating efficiencies that we don't need these humans. Whereas the real reason, and Eugene just kind of touched on it previously, is that maybe companies overhired, maybe it was bad strategy decision making, and kind of AI is the Trojan horse that gets the layoffs through. I'm curious what side of the argument you fall on for that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I don't think it's necessarily that AI has already replaced 10% of the work that gets done at Amazon. It's more that like executives are making a bet, right? They're making a gamble that they can get away with cutting 10% of their workforce without too many things falling through the cracks. And the reason why they believe that is because they think that AI is making everybody more productive. I think that's an important nuance.
Mhm.
But although it's worth noting that like in the short term, like regardless of whether those executives at Amazon end up being right or not, the outcome is the same, which is that a lot of people at Amazon and probably soon a lot of people at other companies too are going to lose their jobs.
Mhm.
But it's like very possible that 3 years from now, executives wake up and realize like, oh shoot, like we totally overdid it. Like
Right.
everyone's burned out, like too many things are falling through the cracks. We need to hire everybody back.
Yeah.
And they correct their mistake. And so if that happens, then this ends up becoming like a 3-year blip in the history of the white collar workforce instead of this permanent decline. And I think that's the optimistic scenario here.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad you brought up that nuance because I do agree. It's not necessarily that AI has already replaced these jobs. It's a bet that it can, which I don't know if that feels better or worse because on the one hand, if it just outright replaces you, at least, okay, AI won this one, like congrats. Whereas now it's, okay, they think it's going to replace me. I don't know, but to your point, I like the silver lining, as always, the optimist, that maybe this will be a blip. So we had a poll on LinkedIn and we asked people how concerned they are about AI coming for their job. And the results are in. 71%, this is almost 5,000 of you weighed in, 71% say no, AI is not coming for my job. I have some thoughts, but Aki, I'm curious, do we have the best employees? I'm sure we have the best employees ever that are watching and responding. Are they too optimistic? Are they naive? What is that surprising? I mean, 71%, that's a lot of people that are not fearing AI.
Well, I think like one thing I've noticed talking to a lot of people about this is like most people's response is like it will replace jobs but not mine.
Hmm.
And I'm like I'm certainly guilty of saying that too. I say like, oh, I think AI is going to replace junior reporters, but it won't replace a senior writer like me. So I think that's like a little bit kind of like basic human instinct, like almost to like try to like protect ourselves. I don't know if you would call that wishful thinking. But I also think that reflects like the fact that a lot of people who are actually on the ground doing the day-to-day work are using these tools, and they're like, yeah, it can do like this one simple task, but there's so many other like hidden things that I do in my job that executives actually don't see, that makes things run smoothly. So that could be behind that too. I mean, like, I'm not, looking at that like breakdown of like 70%, 30%, like, I'm not sure, like, I even know if that's like too optimistic or not, because nobody knows. That's part of what's so scary about this. It's there's so much uncertainty, and also because AI is improving and changing so quickly too, that adds an extra wrench of uncertainty into all of this.
Right. Yeah, you bring up a good point too about executives not necessarily knowing what all of us are doing on a day-to-day basis, which gives us the confidence to say, oh, there are a lot of things that I know from firsthand experience AI can't do. I think the fear is, and this maybe gets back to the 14,000 in Amazon, is that if they just push forward anyway, and then it kind of leaves the rest of us to kind of pick up the pieces. But to your point, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. We also open it up to some questions, and one question we got from Bridget asked, do you think framing layoffs around AI efficiency risks eroding employee trust, especially when most corporate AI investments haven't yet shown measurable ROI? So my read on this question is that companies talk a lot about the AI efficiencies as part of the reason they're making these cuts. But ultimately, and like we're talking about, it hasn't necessarily shown that, whether it's because there's it's hallucinating or other issues. It just hasn't necessarily completely usurped the work that employees do every day. But I'm curious what your take is on kind of the framing of AI efficiency and if that impacts employee trust in the workplace.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like, the analogy that comes to mind for me is the return to office debate. One of the reasons why RTO drives employees absolutely nuts is because companies haven't presented like a lot of evidence that like a full-time 5-day RTO actually improves productivity or innovation or engagement or any of these other quantitative metrics that companies really care about. And also it's worth noting that like there's no evidence in the academic literature on this that 5-day RTO or 5 days in the office is any better than, for example, like 2 or 3 days in the office. And so employees see that and they're like, CEOs are telling me that like one thing, but there isn't like a ton of evidence to support that. So are they just lying? And that creates like a lot of distrust in an organization. And I think that's one of the reasons why RTO is driving engagement down so much. Like, we're adults here as workers, right? Like we want to be treated as adults. And, if there's going to be some major change coming that really affects our lives, like we want to know that it's happening for a good reason. I think AI is, potentially the same here. Like we want to see the evidence that it's actually doing our jobs better than us before companies make these like gigantic changes that make such a huge impact on our lives.
Sure.
That said, I do think the counter argument to that executives would make is that like if we wait for all of that evidence to come in, it's already going to be too late. We will have already lost the AI race because this is all happening so fast.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my take here.
Yeah, and I want to finish with one point that was made by David in Kansas City. He said, friendly reminder, it is your responsibility to protect your job. It's not an entitlement. If AI can do what you do, learn a new skill. And I will say, this is a rhetoric that I have heard. I had a conversation with two CEOs today. They came into the office, and one of the points they made was, yeah, like reskilling, adapting to innovation is something that has occurred for decades. Do you see the validity in that point, or do you think it's a little bit of a mixed bag because, like we talked about earlier, that this happened essentially overnight, so we're not getting that runway to reskill or learn a new skill?
Yeah, I think it's like not only that we're not getting the runway to reskill, but we don't even know what new skills we should learn,
Hmm.
right? So, like, for example, take the example of coding, which used to be like the one safe skill that everyone was supposed to learn if they wanted to stay ahead of technological progress. Um, a lot of people now, a lot of computer scientists, a lot of software engineers I know argue that that's not the case anymore, that, AI has taken up the work of basic coding. And so, like, what's even the point of learning how to code? At the same time, there are a lot of other computer scientists and software engineers I know who say, actually, like, even if AI has taken the job of basic coders, it's now even more important than before to know how these systems work in order to, properly prompt these systems and build systems that really take advantage of AI's productivity
Hmm.
gains. So even the experts on this one particular very important occupation are totally split on this. And I think that, goes to show that nobody knows like what the safe skills are, what the safe jobs are. You can pull the experts and they'll give you 10 different answers. And so, while I do understand like the pragmatism behind that reader's comment, um, I think it doesn't acknowledge the, degree of uncertainty that there is in this, brave new world that we're entering.
Sure, sure. A lot still unknown, but I mean, hopefully conversations like this can't be taken from AI. That's what I'm betting on, or at least hoping for. Aki,
We'll see, Dan.
we'll see. Aki, this was great. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much. And yeah, I think we'll end it there. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in. As always, feel free to shoot us a comment or email if you have any questions. But until next time, thanks so much.